Good morning, students. Today we will study class 10th English Reader First Flight. The first chapter is Letter to God. So this story, A Letter to God, is written by G.L. Fuentes. It is an amusing yet loving story that highlights the theme of faith in God and explores how people like Lencho, a simple farmer who has had great faith, respond to it when driven by it. So this is the innocent and childlike Lencho is the main character here, who is the farmer and who decides to write a letter to God in order to ask for some money because his crops were destroyed in the extreme hailstorms. So this is a story of surprising twists and turns. And equally interesting is the response of the postmaster, who is moved by the simple and deep faith of the farmer and arranges some money for him by way of donations from the employees, though it is less than what Lencho had asked for. Amusingly, he signs himself as God, and the story takes another surprising turn when Lencho writes again a letter and complains that about the dishonest employees of the post office, and who he assumes that God cannot cheat him. He could not imagine that God, if he has sent him the money, he could not cheat him. So it must be the employees who have taken some money from it or pocketed some money of it sent by the God. So here this title letter to God arouses the reader's interest, as the idea of someone sending a letter to God is quite intriguing, questioning. It creates curiosity. The interest is sustained and even heightened on reading the story of how Lencho, the main character here, appeals to God for monetary help, though through a letter. So it is not much about the actual letter, but the unquestioning faith, deep faith, extreme faith of a naive man in the benign power of the Almighty, the God. So here, hence the title here is very suitable, and it creates the curiosity till the end and as the story unfolds itself. So here the main theme is extreme faith in God. The author also delicately poses the question, is Lencho's unquestioning faith in God is appropriate? Is it right to have that kind of faith which might be unrealistic or irrational even? So he is very faithful. Lencho is very faithful in his prayer to God, asking for the 100 pesos, that is the currency that he needs, because his crops were destroyed because of the hailstorm. So here the Lencho's innocent and childlike or naive and an ignorant simpleton. Is he a foolish? Yes, to one extent, yes, he is foolish, because his faith, he had deep faith, but that faith might not be very rational. It might be it might be unrealistic, and that is why one must have a realistic and rational faith. So here the message is that here the message that it conveys is that the Lencho has great faith, and the faith of Lencho is such that he cannot even imagine that it could not have been God who cheated him. Ironically, he assumes that the employees at the post office are the cheat. They deceived him. They pocketed some money out of it which God has sent him. And that is why he is questioning and complaining again in a second letter to God. So here the message conveyed through the interesting story is, while faith is one's spiritual need, faith is important because one's emotional need is satisfied by the faith itself. It connects a bonding between the nature and human beings, a bonding between the spiritual power and the human beings, a bonding between God and human beings. But at the same time, one should be very realistic and rational. Unquestioning and irrational faith like Lencho's can make such people highly vulnerable. In the story, a comic end is achieved due to the good intentions of the post office employees. However, the situation could have been totally different, even dangerous also, if the letter had been found by a bunch of crooks, deceits, who may have exploited Lencho's gullibility, simplicity to their advantage. So here just think about the characters of those people in this story. First, there is Lencho. He is a diligent, hard-working farmer. He had grown corn in his field and was waiting for rains anxiously. He was very happy when rain finally came, but it later turned to worry as the rain became a hailstorm and destroyed his fields. He had deep faith in God, and despite the destruction of his crop, he was hopeful that everything would be all right. You have already heard all is well, all is well. In Three Idiots, it is a very interesting movie. In that, all is well. It gives you a faith, a deep faith, and so many obstacles are removed already because of your faith in God. But that faith must be realistic and rational, because at times when not required, irrational faith can make you very vulnerable. You can have nervous breakdown also. So here he thinks that he had deep faith in God, and despite the destruction of his crop, he was hopeful that everything will be all right. Although Lencho was strong like an ox, a very worked hard in the field, his faith in God prompted him to write a letter to God and asked for 100 pesos from God that he would receive the amount. When he received only a little amount, more than half, he again wrote to God asking for the remaining money and accused the postal department for stealing money. This shows the undoubtedly Lencho was a religious man. He was very religious because he has deep faith in God. But at the same time, he was naive, he was simpleton, and had the unquestioning and unrealistic faith in God. Then the second character is the postmaster. Postmaster proves to be a truly sensitive and generous person. Sensitive, it means he has sympathy and emotions with the others, with the people's emotions. So his first reaction to Lencho's letter to God is of amusement. Initially he was taking it lightly. He was laughing at the letter to see that such faith could also occur. But later he can't help appreciating the deep and simple, albeit naive faith of the poor farmer. He even goes out of his way to help Lencho by collecting from his subordinates a little more than half the amount that Lencho had requested from God. However, his help never came in the knowledge of Lencho. Quite ironically, Lencho in his second letter to God expressed his suspicion about the honesty of the post office employees. The postmaster included and begged God not to route the money through them. Sadly, the kindness and generosity of the postmaster's efforts remained unknown and unappreciated by Lencho. So here, what did Lencho hope for? There are n number of questions in that story. It is a story of a hard-working farmer who has given in deep sorrow, who became very sad and angry with the god because he does not have any money right now to cope up with the family's survival. So the family might, he was thinking, he was very sad because in the absence of money and the required food, his family survival will be in question. So Lencho had grown corn in the field and desperately needed rains to save his crops from dying. He would sit all day at the top of the hill and watch his corn crop. If he rains did not come, it would die. Rains would mean a bright future for his family and certainly no starvation, because otherwise, in the absence of money and food, his family would die of starvation. So why did Lencho say the raindrops were like new coins? Raindrops were symbolized as a good crop. It portended a good crop. They ensured food for his family and money for the rest of the year. Thus Lencho was right in comparing the raindrops to coins, which would bring money and good fortune for his family. Then the other question that comes in mind, who does Lencho have complete faith in? Which sentences in the story tell you this? So first and foremost thing, the Lencho has deep faith in God. And that is why in different stories in which he had expressed his desire that God would help him no matter what, God will help him. If he had asked for money, God will give it, definitely gave him money, and would not let his family die of starvation. So there are two kinds here. The important thing here, how you would assess and analyze this story. So there are two kinds of conflicts in the story, between human and nature and between humans themselves. How are these conflicts illustrated? How this can be shown? So in the initial part of the story, an episode of a much awaited downpour turning into hailstorm shows the conflict between man and nature. When rain comes, Lencho is ecstatic, very, very happy, dreaming about happy days ahead. But when rain turns into hail, he curses the hailstorm. It seems that nature and Lencho want different things. In the latter part of the story, when Lencho blames the post office employees for stealing the part of the money, it becomes the cause of conflict between the humans. One can imagine that the postmaster must have gone through what he read the second later, in which Lencho expressed his suspicion and anger towards the post office employees. It is ironical and tragic also that the best intentions of these good people, of postmasters here, came to nothing because of the Lencho's naive nature or unrealistic faith in God, because he could not imagine that those money sent by the human beings, not by the God himself. So are there people like Lencho in the real world? What kind of a person would you say he is? You may select appropriate words. Okay, so what kind, how can you define Lencho? So in the real world, people like Lencho are very rare. Because Lencho seems to be naive, simpleton, foolish and unquestioning, because he has unquestioning and unrealistic faith in God, though he has great faith in God. But at the time it seemed very naive, very simpleton, and it seemed also very unrealistic. Naive because he doesn't even bother to think about who sent the money or if God would actually send the money. Probably his naivety came from his unquestioning belief in God. Lencho is a diligent, hard-working farmer. He had grown corn in his field and was waiting for rains anxiously. He was very happy when the rain finally came, but later it turned into a hailstorm. And that is why it became a cause to worry. So the hailstorm destroyed all his field. He had deep faith in God, and despite the destruction of his crop, he was hopeful that everything would be all right. Although Lencho was strong like an ox and worked hard in his field, his faith in God prompted him to write a letter to God. He asked for 100 pesos from God and was certain that he would receive the amount. But when he received only a little more than half, he again wrote to God complaining about the complaining about the post office employees who might have been stealing money or pocketed money which God has sent him. So this shows that undoubtedly Lencho was a religious man. At the same time, he was naive, unquestioning and unrealistic, because he could not even thought that these money could be sent by the mortal human beings, not by the Almighty God. So, and it shows a traces of greediness also when he did not receive the amount he had asked from God, because that kind, though he is very hard working, but a little bit, because suppose God has, because he even that amount of faith, that even if suppose somebody has given him a little bit less than he was not, he seemed unsatisfied. So a little traces of greediness is also shown in his character. So that's all for this chapter. So do your question answers, and whenever you have in doubt, ask any questions. Thank you.